Welcome to this inaugural Peach 2020 webinar. We are very happy to be able to stream this event live to you, our audience on both sides of the Atlantic, with some fantastic speakers and technology. It's here we'll be exploring the international trends and behaviours emerging in this post-pandemic world and why they will be so important in shaping local market decisions. As I'm sure many of you know, I'm Peter Martin and I'm going to be your host for today. As hospitality reawakens, operators have a unique opportunity to harness market creativity and innovation to shape a new future. Consumer demand may be returning strongly, but the landscape has changed. Understanding what's happening to frontline teams, product ranges, consumer attitudes, and operational design will be vital if restaurant and bar businesses are to compete effectively wherever they operate. This special international webinar from the Peach 2020 Atlantic Club team brings together opinion formers and change makers from the USA and UK to analyse and discuss the big ideas behind the fundamental issues of product, people and place. And these three focus areas will form our agenda today. Now, of course, none of this can happen without the support of our partners, all experts in their specialist areas, CGA, Harry and Harrison, and not forgetting our charity partner, the amazing Tim Bacon Foundation. Well, hello, it's time to start. We have an incredible agenda for you for the next hour and 45 minutes, packed full of some seriously great speakers from both sides of the Atlantic. Our first session focuses on product. Latest research from CGA's teams in the Americas and Europe has spotlighted how both operator and consumer sentiment has shifted during the pandemic, and now with lockdown lifting in major markets, how this is influencing both product ranges and the customer experience. So at first, to set the scene and to share that insight, we have CGA's Alex Martin in Manchester in the UK and Andrew Hummel over there in Chicago.
Thank you. So to kick off today's sessions, both myself and Andrew are going to be discussing some of the key issues and trends that are currently impacting hospitality globally and specifically in the US. We're going to touch on some of the structural changes, shifting consumer needs, and finally what this means for beverage programs. Firstly, as we're all aware, 2020 has been a tough trading year globally, with hospitality one of the more heavily affected industries. As a result, we have seen markets shrink, and the US market is no different, with 8% of all outlets closing permanently. However, for those that have survived, the return of the on-premise is well underway, with total velocity or rate of sale already bouncing back to 2019 levels. However, there are some nuances between these channels. Fine dining was one of the worst hit. Given the nature of these outlets, largely in city centres, also with some of the heaviest restrictions, and typically smaller venues that were more inhibited by capacity restrictions, it's unsurprising they've not yet bounced back as strongly as other areas. For neighbourhood bars, where we have seen a lot of closures, it means only the strongest have survived. But velocity, again, is performing very strongly already this year versus 2019. Meanwhile, in casual dining venues, which have consistently been a better performer throughout COVID, they were better able to keep hold of some of their sales through takeout and delivery options. We are seeing strong performance also. As a whole, this really is a hugely positive story for the on-premise to see sales returning to 2019 levels so quickly. With sales recovering, optimism is also returning to the trade. General sentiment among operators is that while the majority were heavily impacted by the pandemic in the US, they are optimistic about the future. 76% of operators across US hospitality are very optimistic about the trade for the next 12 months, further highlighting the real resilience we have within our industry. And it's not just operators who are positive. Not only does hospitality engage its consumer base, but its consumers are an optimistic bunch also. 66% of American consumers feel optimistic about the future, which is also higher than the global average, so great for that market. But more than ever, it's vital to understand, what do these consumers want? How are they behaving in outlets? And how are you ensuring you're catering to their needs? One of the fundamental changes in operations last year was delivery. And it is a change that is here to stay. More consumers than ever are using takeout and delivery services and plan to continue to do so post-pandemic. 2 in 5 have also ordered alcohol through delivery, with this increasing throughout 2021, so a key opportunity there to boost spend. Over the coming months, the majority of consumers also plan to order delivery and takeout as much, if not more than they are currently, proving it's something that is of continued importance to the on-premise. So continuing delivery and takeout options is key, and we can see operators are planning to do just that. 42% of operators are already offering delivery through third parties, with 31% also offering alcohol delivery through third parties also, and continuing to do so. I think it's really important here to realise that this delivery option does not need to be something that takes away from the dine-in experience, or that will stop consumers from visiting venues, but actually it increases the number of touch points that operators can have with their consumer base, as you're able to capture more of the in-home occasions, such as the quiet family meal at home, alongside those out of home. Outside of delivery, there are also many other challenges that operators are faced with, as I'm sure you are all aware, and that is happening globally. We will delve in some following sessions more about staff retention and availability as key areas of concern. But alongside this, it's about creating high quality experiences for your consumers, which also ties into how do you create that loyalty and also growing your brand equity overall. This really highlights how more than ever, it's really imperative that operators understand their wider market, also understand global trends, understand their consumers, and have a keen view on the sales dynamics that are at play.
So the key question really becomes, what do consumers want? Family occasions are the most popular occasions, which has remained consistent throughout the last year. This largely represents household visits. It also ties into a key influencing factor that is prevalent globally. A theme across all markets is the desire to meet in small groups. 81% prefer this compared to just 19% who are seeking a large group experience. However, this doesn't mean that consumers will always act this way. Globally, we know that people initially have more confidence visiting outdoor areas and open air spaces. Understanding that global perspective highlights that consumers are more comfortable in indoor venues in markets that have been open for a while. As consumers build confidence during their initial low tempo and small group occasions, we expect to see visitation of indoor and large capacity venues increase. That shift has already begun in the US as the market is reopened. With a large amount of consumers globally and in the US working from home, we've also seen a sales shift across the week. Weekday sales have declined and Sunday is now increasingly important. This is clearly attributed to working habits. With 58% of people still working from home, there is less commuting into city centers and fewer business trips, which drive city center visits. While city centers will eventually get busier and will always play a major role in celebratory occasions, we believe this sales shift may be more permanent as many businesses are adopting a hybrid working model. 74% of people are not planning on going back to the office full time. So this shift in sales should definitely not be ignored in business planning. All of this highlights why creating experiences that the on-premise is known for is more important now than ever. First and foremost, operators need to control what they can control. It is understood that quality of experience is key in consumers' venue choice. Therefore, understanding what makes that experience great is vital. Consumers measure their experience around quality of food and drink, as well as cleanliness and safety measures. Obviously, execution is a bit more complicated, but those metrics should be the core of your value proposition. When you get this experience right, consumers are prepared to spend more, which highlights the pent-up demand. 20% of all consumers are planning to spend more, and 30% of 21 to 34-year-olds who visit the on-premise most frequently plan to increase spend. The intention to spend more is predictably translating to growth in check values, with 77% of consumers stating that they are spending as much or more than pre-COVID in the on-premise. It's unsurprising that average check value in the US has seen a 20% increase versus 2019.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about that is actually that key to growing spend are beverages. Consumers are looking for that experience that they can't have at home, be that a cocktail, a specialist spirit, or just an interesting serve, which could explain why the average check containing a spirit has actually increased 43% versus 2019, higher than the average beer, wine, or even total check value overall over the same period. It's why understanding key trends and getting your assortment right is probably more important now than ever. This brings us on to what are the key beverage trends. So the back bar has shrunk over the last year in the US. The number of brands consumers have ordered has shrunk by a fifth over the year as venues have either scaled back stock or just reduced what they're stocking, and consumers have also looked to return slightly to the familiar. However, what is great is that repertoires in 2021 are starting to edge up very slightly again, hence the importance about assortment again. And what's been great to see is actually 42% of operators are planning to look at their assortment in the next 12 months. And what is key then is what should be stocked. We are seeing a post-COVID return to the familiar when it comes to drinks brands. So for such well-known and loved brands, this could be great news. 45% of consumers are only choosing these products, which is incredible, really, given the on-premise is such a place of trial and experimentation usually. This 45% is also way up from the 31% who stuck to familiar brands pre-pandemic. The element of trust and familiarity is heavily linked to changes in past purchase. With the lack of upselling and external influences, less consumers are currently looking at trying new drinks. Globally, 1 in 4 are still looking, however, to try new brands. This does highlight that maybe while at home, consumers were looking to drink the same, they're now looking to experiment when they're back out in the market. And this experimentation metric also does increase to 31% for those markets that are fully open, which the US market now is, and the UK market should be very soon. So the NPD opportunity is coming back, but obviously caution in those first 3 months of reopening is needed. So when to return to the on-premise in the early stages of the market, what really is influencing their decision to drink? Interestingly, we see the importance on the influence of friends in these early stages. Discounts and overt promotions are also more influential than previously. With access to bartenders limited and many choices being influenced by often poor digital menus, to be honest, we are seeing the influence of what other people around you are drinking is more important than previously. This opportunity, of course, is in answering that big question. If friendship is influencing more than ever, how can we influence the leaders of these groups? It's really important now about getting that upsell on the first order, or at least in that first round somehow.
That's a really great point. What are consumers in the US actually ordering? The US slightly over-indexes on cocktails and spirits relative to the global market. Spirits are also recovering faster than beer or wine since the on-premise restrictions have eased. One of the key post-COVID influence in drinks choice is the convenience factor. To your point, Alex, what my friends are drinking is currently the #1 influence. Simply put, I'll have what she's having is the path of least resistance. I think that really ties into convenience. Packaged, pre-mixed cocktails and hard seltzers became normalized and thrust into the mainstream consciousness during shutdown. We get asked all the time, will off-premise success translate into the on-premise? I think a good point of reference is that only 14% of cocktail drinkers feel that pre-made versus being made in view is an important factor when ordering. So there's definitely on-premise potential. Now, we acknowledge that this subcategory represents just a small fraction of the previous slide, but there is a clear consumer preference shift towards convenience. That demand, combined with staffing challenges that are forcing operators find new efficiencies, are both strong catalysts that should solidify RTD's presence in the on-premise. However, the long-term success may be dependent on the industry working together to define RTDs and seltzer as a category. Right now, consumers are confused, and that is impacting their willingness to spend. It's easy to get distracted by the buzz around what's new, but important to remember that cocktails are still really at the heart of the on-premise experience, and they're growing in popularity. Also, given the prevalence of soft drinks and increasingly health-conscious consumers, a strong, no-low alcohol offering is essential for operators.
So as we've seen, kind of with the change in market conditions, it is more important now than ever to make sure you've got that deeper understanding of consumer needs and market dynamics. It is therefore no surprise to us, and probably no surprise to anyone here, that the key thing that operators in the US and globally are looking for is support in understanding the macro market trends, but also the local market insights that will impact and shape their businesses ongoing. So some final thoughts from me is, do you know your consumer post-pandemic? They have probably changed. They won't be the same consumer they were. Are you clear on what they want? Why are they visiting? And how to engage them? We know that occasion drives behaviour, therefore it's vital to understand the path to purchase for each of these consumer groups and each occasion. As trading patterns shift, leveraging the right offer at the right time, alongside making sure you've got the right assortment and the best strategy there, is going to be key. As we know, Beval grows consumer spend. It grows check values, will therefore grow tips for your teams, and overall puts more cash in your registers. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alex and Drew. That was great, and certainly showing that what's happening in the States is very similar to what's happening in the UK. Lots of lessons to be learned. But now, over to our panel discussion. Of Simon Potts, Ray Phillips Luther and Alex Martin will join me now to answer your questions and discuss further how both competition and consumer sentiment has shifted and is now influencing both product ranges and the consumer experience. Well, welcome all. Welcome Alex, welcome Simon, welcome Ray to the panel. It's quite interesting. We can all see from that footage that experience and showmanship really remain at our leading bar and restaurant brands, both in the UK and the US. But I suppose the big question is, are we really going back to the way life was pre-pandemic? I mean, Simon, let's start with you with The Alchemist. I mean, 19 bars around and restaurants around UK. How much is The Alchemist changed during the pandemic? Will consumers see the difference, or how much is it still fundamentally the same Alchemist we knew back in the day?
I mean, the fundamentals are definitely still there. I'm delighted to hear the insight on the fact that the cocktail market is growing. Absolutely at the heart of what we do. And we've seen in the reasonably short amount of time we've been back in trading this year, we've seen no let up in that. Our best-selling cocktail outsells a pint of Moretti in our venues 2 to 1. It's astonishing the amount of cocktail product that we move. And I think it speaks to the obvious, really. People haven't been able to, or it's much harder to create those sorts of experiences in your home. A bottle of wine, a can of craft lager is one thing, but putting a cocktail together at the sort of level that we're aiming to deliver our drinks, very difficult to replicate yourself. So that will remain very much part of what we do. What we're trying to ensure really is that the same as pre-pandemic, that we're doing that in such a way that marks us out from the crowd, that we're staying one step ahead of those who are trying to replicate some of the drinks that we offer, and we continue to be as creative and as innovative as we always have been. One of the things that put us in pretty good stead was that our venues are generally laid to seating because of the nature of the drinks. We quite like the more gentle pace. So as you know, in the UK, we haven't been able to vertically drink in a bar, a phrase I always enjoy because the opposite is always quite fun to think about, for a good 18 months now. And being able to sit down and enjoy a gentler pace and take the experience in more wholly, I think is something we're going to test this theory obviously on Monday when the restrictions roll back a bit, but it does feel to me like it's something that is going to be a little bit more ingrained. And we're starting to think with the new venues that we're opening next year about design a little bit more. I know we're going to come on to that later on.
Yeah, Ray. I mean, you've been trading a lot longer. We're waiting for it in the UK, and obviously, Front Burner or FB Society, as you're now called, you've got a whole range of different brands. Whether it's Whiskey Cake, which you saw a bit of, 60 Vines, Haywire, The Ranch, or whatever. What are you seeing in terms of that change in perhaps product makeup, but also something Alex picked up on, that change in day part? How are you seeing that altering?
People are ready to drink. So I think the good news is if you have alcohol, you're in good shape. But to your point, Simon, about experiential cocktails, experiences that I can't create in my home. So because we've been on lockdown for so long, the idea of communal dining, getting together with friends, and I think, we saw in the data that I'll have what she's having. I think that stems back to a desire for belonging. So people want to connect. That sense of belonging comes from shared experience. And so in all of our restaurants and brands, we're finding that the experience is more important than ever. So if you've got moments that are kind of magical within your experience, I think doubling down on those is really important. But to your point about kind of how people are using, consumers are using it a little differently than pre-pandemic. So what we're finding is that because of the flexibility in work schedules, we genuinely are seeing a shift to an earlier happy hour. And this is not, the data kind of pointed to promotions and discounts. We're not finding that promotions and discounts are driving traffic. Ultimately, what we're finding is that people want to be where their friends are. So I think, finding groups and alignment with like-minded individuals is important to driving those earlier day parts. And lunches are healthier than they have been previously in some locations. So our suburban markets are finding that lunches are healthier, but then locations that used to have very strong lunches, driven primarily by daytime population, are kind of lagging.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of understanding how that trend works. Because you're seeing it, whether it's in Dallas or some of the other major cities you work with. Certainly concerned about that in the Manchesters and Londons here. In terms of, are people going back to the office any day soon? Alex, I mean, what are you guys seeing at CGA on that one?
Yeah, we've seen some quite interesting trends, obviously, in the working from home. It's something that we've all obviously had to adapt to. I think globally it's about 58% of people are still working from home. And I think of those, I think 50% of those actually plan to continue to work from home. So it is going to cause that shift in trading of where people are at certain points has changed, that shift slightly away from city centre to suburban. And also we've kind of seen, I think it's about 24% drop in people saying that actually they're going out for after work drinks. So that occasion has again shifted slightly. But people are still going to go back into city centres. It's not like the city centre isn't there anymore. It's now about the big occasion. And like Ray said, it's about that belonging and being where other people are. And as soon as kind of the first consumers go back, I think everyone else is going to follow once they want to be in the same place.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, I think you were mentioning earlier when we were talking actually about you're seeing that week change. It's sort of flattened out with trading. Do you think that's going to continue? Or, I mean, what is your experience? So perhaps it's not, the big night out, but you're seeing trading throughout the week.
Yeah, I mean, to the point about office workers, I'm fairly relaxed about that. I think from our point of view, we're perhaps a little bit more destinational. If it was a kind of casual pub environment or the kind of grab and go sandwich places, obviously that those guys are having a bit of a harder time without that more transitory sort of crowd passing through. From our point of view, I'm quite into the idea of the working from home. I think it gives people a little bit more time to think and to plan without that kind of commute time, dragging themselves in and out of a city centre twice a day to and from work. The idea then of going in for something a little bit more exciting and perhaps having the time to do that midweek or midday even, depending on how flexible people's working time is, has been good. Certainly, we were seeing that. I mean, it got a bad press last year, but the Eat Out to Help Out scheme was hugely powerful, I think, in helping people recognise that there were quite a lot of different day parts that could be used to enjoy an experience. And if you were nervous about going in on a big Saturday night and mixing with big crowds, and actually picking a kind of a Monday evening or a Tuesday evening was a way to still have an experience, but not perhaps be overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
And we're still continuing, to see that much flatter London style trading in lots of the regional cities now as well.
I mean, the other thing is about product ranges and how they're changing. Alex touched on that, but obviously one of the drivers of that is a disruption in the supply chain, particularly globally. Ray, I mean, from your point of view, how has supply chain been affected in the US, and has that changed the way you've formulated both your food menus and your bar range?
You know, it's created enormous pressure across the board. So both from a spirits perspective and then also obviously in the food supply chain. And I think what we've focused on is it would be very easy to just eliminate menu items. And I think ultimately at times we have to, but we've really focused on innovating within the same framework. So for instance, crab has been, an item that's very difficult to secure here in the US. So how can we create a similar item, same flavor profile, but using new ingredients. So I think our culinary teams have really had to stretch and grow. When we're thinking about red meat, we're doing a huge, beautiful tableside pork chop, kind of 3-bone at the table at Haywire, one of our concepts here in Dallas. And so I think ultimately what the consumer wants is something new. Simon, you said it. It's something that they can't do at home, something they haven't seen before. And I think when we're talking about celebratory occasions, I'd be careful to think about the traditional celebratory occasion, which used to kind of really be around this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because life is now about celebrating. So I think we had to take this pause in life, and now celebratory occasions are really happening on a Monday afternoon and on a Friday evening. So I think we've got to put our servers in the mindset of people are here ultimately to rally and have, I keep coming back to the word experience, but genuinely have an experience. And as long as we can take the supply chain opportunities that exist and be creative and imaginative with what we're doing, I think we continue to win. But the brands that take the easy way out, I think those are going to be the guys that are going to struggle. And what I mean by that is, there's been a lot of refinement of menu. You see a lot smaller menus in many concepts. And I think the consumer ultimately at a point is going to grow fatigued by that. We're seeing fatigue here in the US in QR code menus. So people are like, give me I'm not going to curse, give me a damn menu, right? Like I don't want to look at my phone. So I think some of the things that became kind of ease of operations for us and candidly were a necessity during the pandemic to survive, we really as operators have to start to think about what is the consumer need and ultimately how are we going to serve it best, and how do you stay in front of that, in front of what they need, not even on it or behind it, so that you can continue to earn the traffic.
But obviously, it comes back to consumer at the end of the day. And I mean, sure. But also one of the things which is developed is, and we talked about this, Alex talked about this, about delivery and food kits and whatever, and certainly in the States you've been probably further down the road, but in UK that's been important. But even in bar trade, because you, Simon, at The Alchemist have actually started putting together cocktail kits to go out in the mail or delivered through couriers. How important is that? Is that one of the questions we keep asking is what's transient and what's structural? I mean, is that going to stick? Is that going to become part of your brand and offering down the road?
I mean, we'll definitely keep it in some form. We've been playing around with the idea. One of the things that we
curse of the webinar.
One of the things that we had always been a bit reluctant about was how well the sort of cocktail that looks really powerful, set on fire, smoking, dry ice, all the things that we're able to do through quite a bit of activity in the venues, what that would look like if it was limply poured over a non-branded glass in somebody's living room while they're watching Coronation Street. And obviously,
that's a cultural reference, by the way, so we've got to watch this.
And no knock to it, obviously. During the pandemic, obviously, those fears went away because people were just desperate for anything. And as we've seen, particularly on the food side of things in our world, people have really pushed along with the meal kit. So it felt like a natural kind of accompaniment to that trend. Honestly, I mean, we see it in the sales. We're still offering the product. We still have it freely available on our online store. But there's nothing like the demand that it was clearly at the point of lockdown. I think some of that is perhaps that we need to maybe further refine what we're doing there. I'm glad that we've built the platform. At the moment, we're obviously very focused on operations and ensuring that our main thing is being curated properly. But I think it's something we'll come back to. And as the world starts settling into a little bit more normality, probably early parts of next year now, in truth, then it's something that we've got ready to go with a good base, and we'll perhaps work a little bit more collaboratively and see if we can just stretch that out a little bit. But for now, it's on the back burner.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of a fantastic discussion. We could go on a bit longer, but a question for all of you. I mean, and it is a bit of forward looking into back end of this year, next year. We talked about consumers wanting experience and to celebrate all through the week. So what's the big trend we should be looking out for, Ray? What's the big trend you're seeing in US and perhaps will be coming over here in the UK?
I don't know that it's about any one big trend, but ultimately the word that I would encourage everyone to focus on is sensory. How do you think about kind of igniting the senses in everything that you're doing, whether that be cocktail or food focused? And I would also encourage, I think there's been a chasm that's grown between the desire and need for convenience and the desire and need to connect. And I think ultimately know your brand, know what your brand really is delivering for the consumer, and double down on that. So if you're a brand that's all about convenience, you've got to be more convenient than you've ever been. And if you're a brand that's about experience, you've got to create that experience in a bigger and bolder way than you ever have. And I think that's ultimately how we win in this post-pandemic kind of consumer land.
Yeah, it's a question actually from one of our audience as well to you, Ray. There's a sense of what percentage of your sales are delivery at the moment. It's sort of one word answer, I think, or don't you want to share it?
It differs by brand, so that would be a difficult question to answer. But it ranges, and ultimately what we've seen is that delivery percentage has declined as people have moved back onto on-premise. So I think that's what you can expect. But
as I think you said, more convenient type brands are probably moving that way, whereas the others are more experiential. Alex, one word: what's a big brand we should be looking out for? Bearing in mind you're in UK, but look at the US market.
I think the big kind of product trend in the US at the moment is definitely hard seltzers. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's wondering what they should be stocking, how many they should be stocking, what should they be taking off the bar to put on a hard seltzer. So I think that's one. But I think it kind of everything just again ties into what Ray was saying. It's about experience, social connection. People want to get back out there. We know younger consumers want to visit more than they did pre-pandemic. So create that experience and everybody will come back.
And it really is one word from you, Simon, because this is the end. One word. What are we going to see?
Going to be sensory, but I'll put personalization and bespoke drinks. I think personalization is going to be interesting.
Well, it's going to be a fun time going forward. And actually, thank you all three of you for your time today and giving us a sense of where it's going. But certainly a hell of a lot of optimism out there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray, Simon, and Alex. Now, as we move on, that was a great first session and some really interesting insight and trends which we've identified. But delivering on those products and experiences, of course, depends on frontline teams. And across the globe, whether it's in New York, in London, or even in Berlin and Paris, we are hearing of major staffing problems. So what we want to do is ask for your experience. We want to hear from you, our audience out there. So shortly you'll see a link and an access to something called Mentimeter. So please go there and then give us just two words that best sum up your thoughts on what the People Challenge means to you. We'll give you a minute to think about this, and then we'll be back with our next session. Keep thinking. Always happens once in a while, even with me. But there you go. As I said, I hope you've been thinking, and obviously I haven't. And you put some good answers in, and we'll be looking at those results very shortly. Now, our next session focuses on people. As we said, labour shortages are now affecting businesses and the hospitality sector in particular right across the developed world. But how much is this down to national circumstances? How much to global trends? Which issues are transient, which are structural and going to stick with us? And what can we learn, most importantly, from the solutions that different markets are deploying to ease the crisis and understand the impact they are making? Now, before we delve into the discussions around this hot topic, let's go over to New York and hear from Luke Fryer, founder and CEO of Harry, the people management platform, about the data he's collecting both sides of the Atlantic and the trends he is seeing. Welcome, Luke. Hi, Luke. Good to see you. How's New York? Hot, I hear.
Hot and sweaty.
Okay, people, big issue, possibly the biggest issue facing hospitality, certainly at this moment. So, big question is, globally, where has all the talent gone and why? And I know you've got some slides to share with us as well. Well, actually, Luke, I mean, you know what's on the slide. I mean, where have the people gone to, you know?
Peter, you are a far better backdrop for our conversation than the slides, let me tell you. So let's
let's carry on. Yeah.
So the where are where are all the people? It's the renaissance we're seeing needs the hands to serve the guests, and obviously both sides of the Atlantic seeing very, very similar themes. I think the best way to start this conversation is actually to take a sort of a bit of a macro perspective. We've got some really clear data out of the US. I think thematically it applies to the UK as well. But the macro picture does give us a little bit of a sense that it's not just us, it's not just the restaurant industry. We've obviously been very significantly impacted. But the first data point here is in February of 2020, there were 165 million people in the US labor force and US workforce. And today there's actually 10 million less people, which equates to about 9 million unfilled jobs, and about 1.6 million of those unfilled jobs are in hospitality. And these are really big numbers. And if you kind of look at what's driven this macro decline in available labor, that's people who are, inclined to actively seeking and willing to work, right? I have two big buckets there. One, immigration has actually been an issue for a few years now in the US. Obviously, we saw 2017, 2018 with the current or the previous administration's approach to immigration, both official and unofficial immigration. That was already creating a structural problem in a labor supply line that's really important for our industry. That shut very, very hard over the last 18 months. And certainly any kind of official immigration has really almost dropped to nil. And if we're thinking about those kind of qualified candidates that would come in under certain visa programs in both markets, they've disappeared. But beyond that, COVID itself has actually had a really significant impact. It's a big contributor in that 10 million decline. We've got 3.5 million people who are long-term COVID casualties. Long-term COVID disabled. We've had 1 million excess deaths, a sharp decline in life expectancies. These are big macro concepts we really haven't faced before. That's a part of the backdrop we're all facing. But if we zoom in to our industry specifically, really focusing in on the restaurant labor pool, there's sort of been three key structural shifts that we want to talk about. I think the first one here, and the slide speaks to it, is if we go back to March and April of last year, we let go of more than 50% of our employees. I guess myself, I have a restaurant in Times Square. I had wanted to keep my employees on for the first week. It was happening the second week, right? We wanted to keep everyone close, and it became pretty clear pretty quickly that this wasn't going to be weeks, it was going to be months, and survival mattered. The output, the outcome there of letting so many people go, well in excess of 6 million workers in the US, was that as we pushed, these other industries pulled. And prior to COVID, we'd seen the impact of logistics and the gig economy sectors starting to, take away from our talent pool. Obviously, essential retail, kicked up in activity just as we were winding down. Obviously, there's going to be a degree of permanency to these shifts into these other industries. So,
yeah, I think we've got another slide to come in here, which talks to this point as well.
And then, breaking into some other concepts here, there's also been this idea of geographic disruption, especially when we look at employees who would, be living in our inner city areas, in our inner urban areas. A lot of businesses that have been linked to, office activity haven't recovered the way we would have hoped. Those people have permanently moved. There is just a fundamental shift in that talent supply pool. But also, if we think about people who may have lived and worked in university towns, people related to seasonal employment, and even large event-based employment pools, right? These have all seen significant structural shifts. Another factor, very important for our career-minded individuals and for our management, our feed of management-minded talent, is the education market, our graduate trends around graduates. We had already seen a fairly steady decline in hospitality graduates from 2012 to 2018, something like a 32% decline in that population over that period of time. If we think about culinary, it's obviously really difficult to learn the culinary arts over Zoom, right? So we have seen that talent supply line significantly disrupted for 18 months now. Yeah. We need that to come back. So lots of factors.
Yeah, and that's a point, because you're talking mainly about the United States, but you could be talking exactly the same about UK, really. This really is global issue stuff.
We are, when I'm talking about immigration, we don't need another lesson on the impact of Brexit, but immigration and significant structural changes in immigration are impacting both markets. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's move on and talk about how that's affecting employees and how they're thinking about the market, because this goes on to the key issue about why they're leaving, but also, how do you retain them?
We're lucky to have an opportunity. We've got sort of more than 5 million candidates and employees on our platform, quite evenly spread between the US and UK, actually. So we had an opportunity to directly engage with 6,700 of those over the last 2 months. And we really wanted to get into the DNA of the employee experience, what our employees are thinking today. It was actually a much greater response rate than we've seen previously to these kind of surveys. I think people wanted to be heard. There was one really clear message. We put up all kinds of statistics. I think for today's audience, we want to talk in the key themes. The biggest message that came across is that what happens in my normal day in the life interaction with my employer matters most. We've seen a lot of kind of headlines around impulsive incentives and people being paid for interviews and one-off gestures here and there. These kind of adrenaline shots into the employee experience, the employee relationship, are just not as effective as really dealing with fundamentals around things like steady and predictable schedules, improving the ability to engage and communicate, understanding growth and development opportunities. These are all things that we've aspired to as an industry for a long time. Yeah. Now they're mission critical.
Yeah. And dare I say, Luke, that moves on to the next bit, isn't it, really? We're listening to what employees are saying. This is the key thing. What can operators do? Because that's the link.
Yeah. I think we say here, getting back to basics, there's a lot of focus on how we can hire better at the moment. It's a very interesting exercise, walking up to your own front door as a candidate and trying to walk down the hallway of the employment process. How long does it take to apply for a job? How long does it take once someone's applied to get a response and get them in for an interview? Right? Our biggest request at the moment is to have live sort of SMS notification of interview of applicants, so you can get to someone immediately, get them in the door. Time kills all good hires in a normal market. Now, speed to applicant response is absolutely mission critical. If someone's spending 7 to 10 minutes submitting an application, you've lost them. It's no matter what the position. Now, that sort of takes care of the hiring side a little bit, just walking through our own front door and really checking those basics. But really today, an ounce of retention is a pound of recruitment, and that retention matters more than ever before. I think one of the first things is you're seeing just so much visibility into wage inflation. As an employee, you're reading the headlines, you're seeing how short labor is in supply across the economy. People know that they can probably get more money elsewhere. We need to get ahead of that. Even if it is providing a clear sense of small bumps in wages over the next 6 to 12 months, right? That kind of predictable increase is going to be very, very important to try and bring stability to teams today. I think the next key thing is everything to do with predictability of scheduling. We have used scheduling or rotas generally as an industry as a tool of labor cost control. We need to rethink this. It actually has to be a tool of retention. Right now, of course, the fundamental role of a schedule is to have, aces in places so we can make hay when the sun shines. The right people in the right quantity at the right time to make customers happy and get the dollars through the door. But the predictability of schedules, both in the pattern of hours that an employee is working, am I used to working nights or weekends or days, fitting in with that other thing in my life I've got going on, very, very important. And we should be looking at our technology to help us deliver that predictability in pattern, if you will, and also, of course, the number of hours and the dollars associated with that. For an industry that does have a backdrop of instability at the moment, we can take a big step forward delivering predictability in our schedules.
Yeah. Now, finally, we've got about a minute before we bring it, and you're going to join us for the panel. But last point about communication quickly, and we can develop this in a minute on the panel.
Yeah, just the one thing we learned when COVID hit is that the notice board doesn't actually work. Right? Effective communication, getting the message through to all the employees, we didn't have those tools. And if it was a WhatsApp group, it was probably problematic. And if we were trying to, send group text messages, that probably didn't work. And obviously notice board didn't work. Communication has to be interweaved with key day-to-day workflows, right? It's got to be interconnected into the employee experience. How's an employee getting their schedule? How are they getting their pay stub, right? We need communication to flow into the kind of behaviors an employee is doing anyway to make on a day-to-day basis to make sure the message actually gets through. So
well, hold that thought there, because you're going to join us for the panel discussion. So let's move on briefly, and you're coming back in about a second or so while we introduce our other panelists. So, our panel of Luke Fryer, Andrew Stoddard and Kerry Gott will now take your questions and discuss how the people shortage is affecting businesses across the developed world. And most importantly, the solutions that we might want to deploy to ease the crisis and its impact. Excellent. Well, welcome all. Now, I don't know, there's Luke. Here's Malcolm and Kerry. How are you? Now, we've just got our results coming through, and I think the important thing comes from in terms of the people is experience. And that's probably the experience that people have when they actually work for you guys. So let's hold that thought about how that goes. But what I want to do is first of all start with you, Andrew. Now, you've worked extensively with global businesses like Merlin, which operates Legoland, Madame Tussauds, Alton Towers, as well as here in UK, one of our biggest pub groups, Green King. Now what you do at Brand Vista is obviously help create compelling brand cultures, but it always starts with people. So I suppose the question is, how does your work developing culture and, dare I say, experience for both consumers and staff have an effect on team retention and team recruitment? And I think we've got a couple of examples you want to talk about. First of all, around some work you've done on revamping a global attraction. Just tell us what the key are.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I'd just like to say, Peter, is you can't have a great customer experience if you have a rubbish employee experience. Yeah, full stop. And that's really, I think, one of the most exciting things coming out of the pandemic. This is about understanding that you have all these amazing people at the front of house who know a damn sight more about this sort of stuff than, say, head office does, should we say? Because this is a bunch of guys who are running an attraction. We ran a pilot with these guys, and we empowered the front of house using the brand absolutely as the filter of everything that they did. We empowered them to change the customer experience, which freaked out quite a few people at head office, I could assure you. But we gave it to them, and what they did is they changed the first contact, which is where they sell tickets. It's where they also use that terrible word, which I abhor, which is upsell. They had lots of opportunities to upsell everything and sell. So you sold this, sold that. So you stole time off the customers because they wanted to get to the attraction. You presenting stuff they didn't want to buy. And so what we did is we engaged them back in the brand, we engaged them in what customers look like, and we allowed them to sell what they thought they needed to sell. And what they did is they sold 2 really great experiential assets. And the results were absolutely phenomenal. Increase the value for money ratings, they increase the dwell times, and of course that then has a lovely knock-on effect on spend per heads go up, yield in F&B went up, and they could just see it. And the whole team within the attraction felt it as well. So again, that was a piece of, you mentioned communication, that action is also a brilliant communicator. Doing stuff actually really gets people very excited. Customer satisfaction went up, and for that one site alone, they got a return of about 56,000 quid from these amazing people at the front of house. Multiplied over all the outlets worldwide, they're dropping 2.8 million quid to the bottom line. So these brilliant people empowered to do something. And also the other thing we found from them is they started to recruit really interesting people. Because actually the really interesting people who judge you, that just like a consumer judges you, they're reading us like a book, So they got really great people by attitude, because the attitude in the place changed.
So that the great people recruit great people. Now, another example I think we'll touch on before we move on to Kerry is that some work you've done with airports. Now, airports are not, are not the nicest places to be at the moment with queuing and whatever. But I just wonder, some of the work you've done there, any lessons to be learned about how we're going to cope as an industry with people's concerns about health and safety going forward. Briefly, what's perhaps the key learning you've got out of your work with the airport industry?
Well, again, it's these kind of amazing people at the front of house can solve a lot of your problems and actually clarify. The other thing people haven't got a lot of is time. So how do you give teams time back in their kind of working life? So, for example, at one airport, this is exciting. This brand consultancy stuff when we're talking about baggage throughput through security. This is branding. This is brand stuff, but it is, because basically the quicker we could get people through safely, applying all the safety elements of that, all the social distancing is in place. But actually, if you can improve the throughput, you then get a better customer experience, less hassle, so people are in a better mood, and there was a kind of moods issue there, and also then they're freed up to go and spend some more money at the other airside. So again, there's always an impact if you take it, but at the moment we're seeing most of the work being doing helping people find time. So, for example, the resolving the car park complaints issue, right? Dropping it by 90% freed up the call center to do really important stuff that they're employed to do. And so again, it's sweating the small stuff. Somebody said the basics, and I think you've got to look at your basics through your brand and do them brilliantly.
Yeah. And also taking a pressure off. I know that's something Kerry and I have spoke about before. Kerry, welcome. I mean, you're working at heading up the people side at Hawksmoor, and the thing about Hawksmoor is that here in UK it is regularly at the top of the list of best places to work, and not just in hospitality, across business. And I suppose that's and you're not the only one in the restaurant sector. So we have this sort of dichotomy, don't we? This polarization with this bad image of hospitality on one level, but you guys are actually doing a great job, and your people are telling us. So what's the key to Hawksmoor's success? How do you make it work? And dare I say it, how are you feeling the market at the moment? Because you're not immune from the crisis.
So I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of hard work. It's not something you just do once. And I'd echo a lot of what's been said, and particularly experience coming up as the most important thing. It's about culture and it's about experience. And we have been, as you said, we've been a top 50 company to work for in any industry in the Sunday Times Best Company list for 10 years in a row. And that's going from 3 restaurants in London with 150 people to 700 more restaurants across the country and now opening in New York. And so it's a lot of work. If I just kind of pick 3 things that have really helped me to kind of do that over the last 10 years. One is, I think, having a really strong idea of who you are. We know who we are. We've got a clearly articulated culture. We've got clear values. And then it's about embedding it and always working to make sure that we stay true to that culture, and we keep it and we protect it, whatever else is happening. I think a second thing is not having had strong preconceptions about what hospitality jobs should look like because they're hospitality jobs. And I think increasingly with the recruitment market, there's more and more pressure on us to do that. And my background isn't hospitality, but kind of coming in with fresh eyes, I think, is helpful. As Luke was saying, people want security. They want more security. They want development. They want careers, and those are the sorts of things we offer. Yeah.
Are you seeing, because I think applications, to jobs even at Hawksmoor went down. They're coming back now, and you're on the front cover of it, actually, the Sunday Times, with the incentives you were offering your staff. And I know they weren't new, but how important is that? And I mean, Luke touched on that, the fact that and even Andrew, teams recruit teams. How important is that to getting that culture and, dare I say, the experience?
Yeah, so we would definitely hit on recruitment as well. Just for context, pre-COVID, we'd have 300 or 400 applications for each role at Hawksmoor. When we were hiring in May, putting adverts out for the reopening, we were having 20 for a waiter role. So management recruitment's fine, waiter roles, front of house was difficult. And that is back up. So I checked, and our latest waiter role had 290. So it's improving. 20% of those have been through people's recommendations, people who work here. And I think for us, there have been gimmicks. Luke, I think, talked about some of the gimmicks, and it's not very us. It's not us to pay people to join us. I don't think you attract the right people. And we wanted the money to go to people here who have had a really difficult year. So it's really helped. And I think, whatever we do on culture, there's the framework. And I talked about some of the things that the companies do. Culture is people. We put the framework in, but culture is, have my team got my back if I have a difficult experience? How did my manager talk to me? And it's about the people you hire. So for us, really, this experience is about putting people at the heart of it. It is the number one priority in the company for everybody. And it's about making sure we still hire carefully, even as things are difficult and there's more pressure because of restrictions going and wanting to flex up. It's about hiring those people who will keep the culture.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a question here from Wally Doolin, of all people. Wally, glad to see you in the audience, Wally. We've talked about people leaving the industry, and Wally's question is really about: have you seen any demographic shifts in people leaving? Is it different sort of people? Luke, what are you seeing out there? Is it just people getting to an age and moving on, or are we seeing something different in who's leaving? I think you're on mute, sir.
Hey there, sorry. I'd say in terms of, if we talk about demographic shifts, I think one of the, obviously the key things in the UK is we had such a high proportion of European nationals in our employment base in the UK. There is a structural shift there. There's also some confusing data because there were, in theory, 3.8 million people from the EU based in the UK pre-Brexit, and 5.8 million have applied for sort of permanent residency there. So I think that the final data there is still to be sorted out, and obviously the impact to our industry is still to be sorted out in terms of that Brexit movement. I'd say in the US shifts, unfortunately, the data's again not super easy to get a handle on, but we had about 1.7 million, unofficial immigrants a year flowing into the US at its peak. I think in the mid-teens, so to speak. That was a very, very important source of labour into our industry, and it's very hard to see where that is at the moment. But it has seen a very, very significant decline. In terms of, I don't have good data at the moment in terms of age or other types of shifts there, but certainly we'll get some of that information and circulate it to the group.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I suppose the thing that comes through is, one of the questions here as well, just the final sort of end on is it about aspiration here? Is it, is this an industry which people aspire to going? How much work do we have to do? Is it a structural thing, or actually do we spend more time actually highlighting the success of the likes of Hawksmoor and their peers, or some of Andrew's clients? Andrew, what's the key to getting the right people into this broad hospitality sector?
Well, I think a lot of people have mentioned it so far anyway. It's actually having a clear view about who you are, what your purpose is, and why anybody would want to get up in the morning and come and work for you. I mean, if we're brutal about this, the industry has used sort of new statistical models to beat the living daylights out of the front of the house, and get them into all these sorts of boxes where actually they're people, and people buy people. So we all know the great servers and all that sort of stuff. So, and they're doing it because they get it, and you've got to help people get what you are trying to do. If you don't do that, then you're just asking them to fly blind. You'll end up as a generic offer. You'll have no individuality. But get it right, and these people will blossom and grow. And the thing I love about hospitality, it is the industry of opportunity. I always liken it to the poppies that grow in a battlefield after war. It's a regenerative thing. It always, new bits of cities that grow up. Hospitality is the first to start making inroads into it. It builds and creates communities. So it has to do the same thing with its people. It has to believe in its people, and that belief is actually another tool of communication.
Yeah,
I think we've let some of the humanity of the industry go over time, and I think it comes back with all this lovely innovation. I love Hawksmoor. It's absolutely. I go to Deansgate. So it's just a nice experience.
Yeah, Kerry. Last words for you. I mean, it goes also with the question we've got from Anne Elliott as well about, are things going to get worse before they get better? What do you think, and what is going to be the key to get out of this?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I think it's too soon to know. Like, obviously we've had Brexit, and COVID has exacerbated some of these things, but such a massive issue is uncertainty. People want certainty. It's been an awful year, and people need certainty to decide to leave their job or to join a job or to move geographically. And I think until there's more certainty, and until things like the financial support systems in the UK and the US for unemployment have changed, it's a bit too soon to know whether or not people will continue to join the industry. But there's so many good jobs and careers in the industry, and there's so many reasons to join it.
Well, thank you all very much. Now we've only just touched the surface on this, and we know this is going to be one of the biggest issues. But you brought some very interesting and different perspectives, and I think if the core thing we know, this is not just a UK issue, it's not just a US issue. We've got some fundamental issues, and perhaps we can more conversations like this across the Atlantic may well get some more solutions. But really, thanks, three of you. Thank you for your time this afternoon. So it's time again for some more feedback. So shortly on screen, you'll see our next question. And this moves into our final area. And the question is, what trends will have the most impact on the physical design of venues? Because we've talked about product, we've talked about people, but we're also going to talk about venues, both physical, but also, and we're going to talk a bit about virtual as well. Anyway, the Mentimeter is going to come up, so use the link provided and give us your trends. And again, you have a minute to think about it and to fill in the form. Thank you very much, and see you very soon. Well, welcome back. As I said, our next session focuses on place. Now, we're going to highlight how physical spaces are evolving fast with the new demands of the digital world, the need for convenience and safety, strong brand identity, and the incorporation of new operating models. Many of the things we've talked about already, but also, I suppose, quite importantly, how virtual places are having an impact even here in hospitality. Now, we're delighted to have Sarah Jenkinson from Harrison joining us from Dallas to tell us some more.
Thank you, Peter. My take on this subject is post-COVID, retail and hospitality brands have adapted to a new environment and created a new landscape and exploring a wider spectrum of offers to give the customer more reasons to come back. They are distinct drivers which all brands need to embrace. These should be integral to our business. As we learn to adapt, brands must make sure of your colleagues and your guests provide a safer environment to operate in, as well as serve great food in a fast and more convenient way. From a technical point of view, continues to play a huge part with contactless payment, order pay apps to ordering technology and pick up food lockers. In addition, the agility is also vital. A good brand must be able to react to the market conditions swiftly. And lastly, the guest experience must be central to the infrastructure of the brand, putting the guest at its heart. In addition, clients are asking us to think out of the box and not be vanilla on the F&B landscape. It's about creating a unique moments that become synonymous with the brand. We need to think of a seamless customer journey and which now means just not only one journey, but we now need to recognize much more need states in multiple ways. The first similarities we see are in different sectors, retails that transition into the world of hospitality, where retail plus entertainment, called Retailament, is created by the likes of Lego, and opening their stores in New York this month to a new concept where it puts entertainment, play at its digital platforms at the heart of its retail offer. But this is not only happening in retail, but hospitality too. Those that make the change are the ones that will be successful. Our first trend I'm going to talk about is the rise in technology of the virtual kitchen. Before coronavirus, restaurant operators were taking virtual kitchens one step further by opening new concepts and that had never existed in actual restaurants. But the pandemic, which forced designers to stay at home indoors and create an explosion in the takeout and food delivery market, accelerated the process. These kitchens are opening in existing restaurants or in a ghost kitchens. In Pasadena, California-based gourmet hot dog company, Dog Haus, were planning to launch several extra brands from their well-established plans, got sped up because of the pandemic. Dog Haus rolled out several concepts. The chicken concept, Bad Mother Clucker, and I've got that right. Vegan concept, which is called Plan B, and the morning focus concept, Bad Ass Breakfast Burritos, and the Better Burger brand Fry Burger. All of these menus were created in addition to the Dog Haus original menu. These concepts themselves were created by examining the data and the most popular searches on the third-party delivery apps. This has been a real huge success for them. Our second trend we have seen the rise of the prototype concepts. And as you see in the animation flyby, prototypes need to consider all the need states of the guest. They must include off-premise as well as dine-in experience. Dog Haus has, as you've already heard, diversified into virtual brands, but also looking at the complete customer journey. At Harrison, we've developed a prototype for Dog Haus that considers a drive-through, pickup, and DSP experience to reflect and incorporate the brand format. Prototyping allows us to consider the totality of the design and cover the spectrum of experiences, after which the concept can be refined into a franchisable opportunity, which is really, really important in our case. In those 3 minutes of order to collection, the experience must positively reflect the personality of the brand and it not be that drab experience. But not only that, we are seeing more requests for pickup and DSP to be integrated into that seamless journey. So the need states of the customers don't come into contact with the dine-in customers. We are providing solutions where the journey doesn't cross-pollinate, and you can really see this in the Dog Haus example. This really enables convenience, which enriches that experience. You can see that there is a clear communication and the wayfinding into the infrastructure of the building, which is not just directional, it brings a unique brand vitality. This leads us on to the emergence of retail and hospitality, which have been sold together for ages and has been done by the likes of Carluccio's, Italy, and Itsu in the UK, and La Madeleine in the US. But what the difference is now is where the experience from the restaurant is being brought into the home. Branding the product and having to relate directly to the restaurant brand, rather than just say the showcasing the broad range of Italian products, as in the Carluccio's example. Fogo are doing something the same, and that's Fogo de Chão are doing something the same, or on a new way of diversifying its restaurant into their digital and retail platforms. They've expanded off-premise in such as the Butchery and Fogo to Go, as well as creating a new experience within the traditional format of the Next Level Lounge, which is where you, after a meal, you can go and a celebration can happen, and you can go and have a cigar and a glass of wine and something Scottish. The brand experience is not just about going there, it's about creating an authentic cuisine and a place where you can go and buy premium cuts of meat prepared in a Brazilian way. You can then go home and be your own chef and cook with ingredients cards, with online guides, links to Fogo Chef on a YouTube channel. This is really linking and connecting all the platforms from digital to physical environments. This really brings the experience into the guest home. Brands are making sure that packaging are revealing and is comparable experience. Similarly to how you open an Apple product, and it's definitely a sweet spot at that moment of ceremony. Our expertise in this trend really is shown in the Butchery experience. And the savvy guests will pick up consciously of this and not part of the storytelling, reinforcing the brand experience. The fifth trend is the emergence of off-premise liquor sales. Next slide, please. Thanks. Due to COVID, some US states relaxed the liquor license rules to enable us to pick up alcohol from drive-thrus. From Fat Tuesday's perspective, a daiquiri brand saw the opportunity to adapt their offer by moving into drive-thrus. They need to recognize that 3 minutes of order and the pickup reflects the brand values. The outside of the building has to be an explosion of their brand. This combines not only with the building, but also how we order, how we see it, the music being played, the connectivity of the drive-through, and that on-app experience. As the new generation like to move, like to have more time at home, and like to take drinks to a gathering, Fat Tuesdays needed to change their bar model to complete drive-through experience, where there are no traditional bars, but where the car drives up to the pickup window, the whole guest experiences is the drive-through. This needs to be efficient and fast, where technology infrastructure and the operations is key. Our sixth trend is we are experiencing is the CBD and THC revolution. Again, as states relax their laws, cannabis products, the market has really exploded. It's a growing market which is worth $2.1 billion in the US and will grow by 21% by 2028. As people becoming more comfortable with benefits by using CBD and demystifying the medicinal and recreational usages, there are still the standard dodgy smoke shops, but we are seeing innovation from high-end restaurants to coffee shops. The demographics is also really fascinating. THC for the younger Gen Z and millennials, and on the other end of the spectrum are the CBD users. The older generations, the young at heart, are also using THC rather than drinking alcohol. We have seen the need for multi-dimensional hospitality, which is from a medical dispensary to a coffee shop, transitioning into a bar at night, creating the same philosophy as the food industry. So we're looking at people such as Prince Charles and the Duchy Estate and Ludlow Farms, where the process is controlled from the field to the shelf, and it's becoming a really happening industry. And lastly, the next trend is gamification. Some of the best marketing has come from gamification, customers engaging are better in fun ways and don't feel like they're being sold to, relate better with a brand by creating loyalty. Improving sales, it is used by McDonald's with their Monopoly game, and United Airlines started the frequent flyer program. Behavioral economics drives gamification, and it's developed into a subtle art of personalization, offers and builds loyalty by using science and psychology to create that rewards program, which gives the customer a competitive side. It goes further by delivering data to help brands develop and translate positive cash flow. Chipotle, the first match, used their gamification in a game called Guac Hunter, where guests would win extra food that involved the game theory to drive the business. And Starbucks has done the same with loyalty. Last month, Starbucks app was downloaded the most globally. As you've heard, there are several trends here that are here to stay. And those who will adapt to the new platforms will add a new dimension to succeeding.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I must admit, there are some obviously trends in the States which are coming over, CBD, THC, we will find out. But I am absolutely intrigued by a drive-through daiquiri bar. Can't wait to go to that one. So anyway, Sarah, you're going to be joining us on our panel, but let's introduce the other members of that. Glenn Edwards, Simon Potts, along with Sarah Jenkinson, will now take your questions and discuss in more depth the themes that Sarah has highlighted, especially how physical spaces are evolving with the new demands of the digital world, the need for convenience and safety, strong brand identity, and the incorporation of new operating models. Well, welcome all back to our final panel session of the day. We're talking about place, and let's have a look at the results of our Mentimeter. Space is the thing that comes out. Digital engagement, big up there. Separate entrances, premium experiences, which actually feeds back to where we started today, as does togetherness. So it's about how we can put all those in one place. But I think interesting thing, hold that thing about space, and that may have something to do with our post-pandemic world. But obviously one of the things we did see in Sarah's presentation, which is obviously big in the States and we know is coming to the UK, is a drive-through. And so that means, Glenn, I'm going to start with you, sir, because I think a lot of people may have been surprised by Leon's move only recently, your announcement to roll out a number of drive-throughs of the concept in UK, and we've got some images to look at. So, but Glenn, what is the thinking about Leon going into drive-throughs, and how are you going to keep that your brand values about particularly health and sustainability in that environment?
Well, it's interesting that you're surprised, Peter, because I think when Henry and John started Leon 18 years ago, it was always about recreating fast food and helping people fall back in love with fast food, and sort of based on the premise of why can't fast food be good food? And I noticed an article the other day, but in the last 5 years, there's been a 41% increase in drive-throughs in the UK. And coincidentally, 5 years ago, we started flirting with Eurogarages. It was going to be a drive-through partner for us. And I say coincidentally because 5 years later, we're no longer a partner, but they're the owner. So they bought Leon,
exactly, yeah.
as you've probably seen in the press recently. And clearly where we're seeing a huge opportunity is the high street is getting really busy. Downtown CBD, key worker locations are getting emptier. And for us, it's very much about getting into areas where there's plenty of people. So we're literally in construction at the moment, just off the M62 in West Yorkshire, just outside Leeds. And it's got an IKEA, and it's got a cinema, and it's got strong residential, it's got major transport going past. So it feels a very natural place for us to be in terms of moving to where people need us the most. And drive-through is clearly part of the fast food mechanism, and we've seen it from the big global players. So it's an exciting time for us. The question we've asked is, how do we make a drive-through Leon and not just another drive-through? One of the feelings that we want when people come into a Leon is that feeling of joy, that richness and warmth of service, the atmosphere in the restaurant. And how do you mirror that when you're in your car and you're going around the outside of a building, probably past the trash cans at the back? And you can see from that visual there, we've put a couple of like structures around, so as you're driving around, you get the feeling of, even on a grey West Yorkshire day, it's going to be well illuminated. You're going to feel a warmth as you drive under the arch. Music on the outside of a building, so you feel part of the Leon experience. As you get round to the drive-through window, rather than being a tiny hatch in an aluminium clad wall, it's going to be a full glass window, so you can see the team member standing behind and smiling at you. And likewise, when you come inside the Leon, it should feel like a Leon. So that's certainly the hope, and that's what we're planning and building. Now, we always feel that we want to serve food that both tastes good and does good. And certainly if you buy 7 cups of Leon coffee, you're going to replant a square metre of rainforest. If you go to Sainsbury's, small plug there, and buy a bag, you're going to plant 4 square metres of rainforest. And we wanted the restaurant to reflect that we want to be neutral in how we operate in the world. So on the top of this roof, it's solar powered. There's going to be a wind turbine if we get planning consent. The planting, we're just seeing how do we neutralize the 3-minute car experience going around the outside with planting. And of course, EV, so electric vehicle charging points, ever more important now. And I think this is where the opportunity stands in EG and Leon, because next few years, petrol cars are going to be a thing of the past. And it does take 10 minutes to charge an electric car. So what are you going to do with your 10 minutes? And if you've got somewhere comfortable to have a carbon neutral burger and some good coffee and relax, then we see that as an opportunity.
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Today, I suppose, and this is a political comment, slightly political comment for us in England anyway, with your co-founder Henry Dimbleby actually launching part 2 of the food strategy for England, and part of that is getting people to eat healthier. And actually, in a sense, you are taking that healthy message out to mainstream. So basically, you're becoming, Leon is you want to be a mainstream brand rather than a niche London brand where one might argue you started. And this is the way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about accessibility and making it easy for everyone to eat well and live well. And it's a great article, and really do read the whole. Henry's put an incredible amount of work in. It's definitely worth a read. I'd skip the headlines in the Daily Mail and read the whole report. It's a good report.
Well, I think our Prime Minister has been slightly dismissive already, but I am not going into politics at the moment. We are talking about design, and certainly not being parochial just about England, but certainly design. And you know, Simon coming in a sense, you're at the other end, because in a sense it sort of reflects what we were talking about with you and Ray earlier. You know, the convenience side where Glenn is, no matter what the product is, it's about reducing the friction. In terms of where you are basically delivering experiences, how is design, how you're thinking about design and the bar changing? Because in a sense, talking about people coming back to the bar, but we've seen people, you know, in US as well as UK, being more relaxed about table service, being not necessarily being at the bar. How's that sort of shaped your thinking about the physical space you have?
Yeah, I'm still just trying to get my head around the drive-through daiquiri bar at the moment.
Well, I think obviously this is something you'll be looking at soon. You know, the other end of the M62 probably, but still,
The licensing subcommittees up and down the country falling off their chairs when that one gets presented to them. Sort of local politics. In terms of design for us, it's exactly what you said, and we talked about premiumization earlier in the product session. That obviously just goes well beyond what happens in terms of the drink in the glass or the food on the plate. That's got to be good, but the whole environment has to speak to what you're trying to deliver from a brand point of view. The bar is a really interesting notion for us at the moment. We always look at that is the first thing that we think about when we take a new space over. It's the focal point of our offer. You know, we have a significant restaurant element to what we do, and not necessarily traditional in the sense that everyone is kind of pressed up against the bar, but everything kind of points in towards it. It's the stage where we deliver the theatre that we're serving throughout each service, and we're going to have to see how the way that people interact with that, if people are thinking more about sitting down, less inclined to seat and order at the bar, how we make that sort of play with the space. I think the other thing that is starting to wake up a bit, certainly for me, and operators aren't going to like it, is that when we take a space over, very little thought historically has been given to what is done in terms of staff welfare. A tiny space maybe to dump a bag, and I think we're hearing loud and clear that people need to be better respected for the work that they're doing in venues, and some of that is going to mean that there's proper sort of rest space for them as well. So we've got another driver that perhaps hadn't been considered before to think about when we're arranging the space. I think we're not seeing it too much yet in our world, but this idea of sort of creating space for the delivery and kind of secondary drivers of the venues to happen. We're not building that in just yet, but we talked a little bit about retail, and Sarah used a really good phrase, retailment, I think she called it, which if we're thinking about sort of expanding an at-home range or some of the kind of byproducts of what we do and selling those as items, then thinking about building a retail element in is really interesting. And it's actually one of the ideas that we're working with on one of the venues for next year at the moment in the early stages.
Let's talk about, something you mentioned, Sarah, and perhaps you pick up on this in terms of dark kitchens, ghost kitchens, depending what we want to call them. There's a big growth in that, but and obviously with virtual brands and that and how they work, and particularly the Doghouse example is very interesting in a sense they're developing those within their external kitchens. How much do you think sort of ghost kitchens are going to be an adjunct to existing restaurant spaces, or how much are ghost kitchens going to be on separate standalone sites? How do you see that panning out?
I think it's a mix, really. There's that mix of people, like with the Doghouse example, is that actually there's a huge opportunity for businesses to take on other brands that don't actually have to be in its physical form. So I think as operators see that's really successful, then they can start to tag it on to their already existing offer. And then, there is that case where, you want to start off in the hospitality industry, and a ghost kitchen is a massive platform. And in the US, I'm surprised at actually how many brands there were actually sort of on the beginning of that revolution, and how many people have been coming to us and saying, actually, we really want to be that disruptor in the industry. So I think it will just I think we'll see really new concepts as the new generations are coming through.
Yeah, from your point of view, Glenn, as well, in terms of your vision for how Leon is going to develop. Omnichannel is the phrase we haven't used today, but it's very, very common. You talked about retail. In terms about how is ghost kitchens being produced, having your products produced elsewhere. We've seen it even some of the top end steak restaurants here, which have moved into not necessarily delivery but kits, and they've become in a sense a business on their own. What are some of the other things you're looking at? Can Leon be produced elsewhere rather than just in your stores?
Yeah, absolutely. A question we're asking at the moment. So we have a couple of ghost kitchens. We've got a couple of virtual brands, and certainly the virtual brands is a brilliant way of testing something in a very small audience. And the Better and Tex burger was a virtual brand product that made it onto core menus. So that was really helpful. We're obviously exploring drive-throughs, conventional high street type locations still, but also looking at footprints of where's the most people often equals where's the smallest space. So we've got some development work going on in terms of what does a small, almost a kitchen look like with high footfall past it, which would then serve as a dark kitchen. It would serve almost a concert venue, I guess, that type of high pitch. And there's many of those as you look at transport hubs, etc., across the country.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because obviously you too recently you were running Leon in the States, and obviously pandemic hit. You're out of that now, but I'm just thinking about what any particular experiences having lived around the DC area for so long. You're brought back to UK, or you think can come back in, because I think this is one of the things we're getting out of it all today. There's a lot of commonality, and it's a matter of how we cross fertilize.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went up to see the Euro Garage guys, and I went to Frontier Park, which is one of their developments, and it had a Starbucks and a KFC. And I got there at 11 o'clock at night, and I thought, eeks, we entered America far too early. Seeing these standalone pad sites, drive-throughs, I think would have been a much smarter entry for Leon into the US, because that's where the scale and the scope of the opportunity is, versus copying a downtown type location where. Yeah. But it's interesting looking at the food trends, and certainly there's this whole Irish concept, which is talking about coming to the UK and into London with the fast casual counter, which there's a lot of human interaction. And it's interesting, Chipotle hasn't had the growth in the UK that it's probably had in the US, and how the customer sentiment towards customization is quite different US to UK. But as that changes in the US and much more app driven, I think Sweetgreen are really leading it. I think it'd be interesting how the door opens in the UK to those brands, and interesting about the Starbucks being the greatest downloaded app in the world. I think there will be more crossover, and technology will blur the lines between US and UK concepts. Well, I don't think historically it has.
Yeah, well, let's end on technology, because that is one of the things which has really grown. The digital world is probably encroached more in hospitality in lockdown than any time before, and certainly in our day-to-day lives, whether we're in the States or UK, we're used to getting things delivered. I mean, Simon, when you were talking earlier with Ray, technology is an important part of the customer experience, because we live with, your customers are definitely digitally literate, but people still want that face-to-face experience. How is digital going to sort of define even the, as it were, the physical space of your bars, bearing in mind people are finding out where they're going to go online and then probably getting an Uber home, depending on where you live?
Yeah, I think we're treading carefully with technology, really. There's a bit of a danger sometimes that you end up doing tech for tech's sake. Everyone talks about it. There's a lot of noise around the sector. Some of that is commercially sort of motivated, I don't doubt. And I think we've seen people deliver technology solutions well, and perhaps a bit clunkily through the pandemic. The idea of order and paying at table is good, obviously, especially in bigger venues, and we're going to retain an element of that. But fundamentally, I think we've talked a lot about experience, and it's very hard. In the earlier session, we talked about digital menus being a little bit limited and quite hard to navigate compared to the physical form. As I said earlier on, we're going to see on Monday perhaps a little bit more interaction with between staff and guests. And I think at heart that is going to stay. What we're trying to do with tech from a sort of design point of view is to incorporate it into the venue space, to make it part of the theatre we're looking to deliver. So an example of that would be, we've got a venue opening up in Edinburgh later this year. It has a standalone lift to take it up. It's on the second floor of a development there. So we're trying to make that first step into the space, although we don't have control of it from a normal environmental point of view. We can't have music in there. We can't decorate it in the way perhaps we want to, but to put in some digital installations that start the customer journey before they step into our space. So there's a kind of phasing of it. And obviously, we'll be looking to have a bit of fun with those animations, and obviously to keep them fresh and up to date. And I think, you're always searching for that kind of Instagrammable moment. And I think we can do that before we even get into the venue there. So that'll be useful. And then also trying to incorporate it into the drinks experience itself, which is easier said than done. And we had a little go at some augmented reality cocktails just before the pandemic hit. And they've maintained and are still quite popular in the venues now. But they probably need a sort of secondary version of that, and trying to make that work a little bit harder for us to stand out from the crowd. So yeah, trying to keep the tech fun and not sort of too clunky.
Yeah, well, we're living through tough times without a doubt, but everything we've seen today, heard today, is about the excitement about new thinking coming through. Sarah, last word with you. Someone who is a Brit, recently gone to the States, and now managed to get into the States to take up your new role there. what is the one thing, bearing in your experience of the States, you in terms of design trends, you think it can make it back into UK, apart from obviously the Daiquiri bar?
Oh, let me think. What I think we kind of, when we've spoken about it in the fact that things are cross-pollinating, and I think everything that's in the US is being inspired by the UK and the UK and vice versa, and it's really hard just to pinpoint an actual trend. But I really, the drive-through experience has been the rise, has been one of the success stories in America, because culturally the drive-through is inherent into their society and their culture.
And we are certainly seeing more of those in the UK. All three of you, thank you so much for joining me. And that actually is the end of today's webinar. We've covered a lot of ground in terms of product, people, and place. But as I say, we're sadly at the end of the first Peach 2020 Atlantic Club webinar. So thank you very much to all our audience for joining us today on both sides of the Atlantic, and probably other places too. Massive thank you to our speakers for sharing their insight and helping to develop all the thinking of these key issues, as I said, around product, people, and place. We only touched the surface of many of those, and these will be the things we'll be developing in the coming months around Peach 2020. And of course, thank you to our partners, CGA, Harry and Harrison, for making all this possible today. And also thank you for my tech team as well, who have spent a lot of time putting all this together. So it's been quite an experience to get this off the ground, but we'll be back doing more. As I said, there'll be lots of challenges and lots of opportunities. We'll see how it all pans out in the weeks to come, and you can download a recording of today from the new Peach 2020 website, which should be up next week, but certainly from our YouTube page as well. Details here. And more importantly, there'll be more webinars, podcasts, and importantly, soon more face-to-face live events coming from the Peach 2020 team. So all it remains me to say is goodbye and good luck with your businesses. Goodbye.